So I would say Game Pass had a pretty interesting week when you guys. I have Mr. Matty Plays and Wood from Beat 'em Ups here.
Hi.
Wood actually had messaged me and was like, "Hey, I kind of want to talk about Game Pass. Everyone's talking about Game Pass, and
Yes.
I haven't mentioned it as much on the channel. So I thought we would have some fun here and talk about Game Pass. And then I remembered, I said, wait, I know Maddie made a video recently talking about Game Pass as well, and it wasn't really something I was thinking too much about, but I thought it would make for an interesting conversation here on the channel. So Maddie, thanks for joining us here. Wood, thanks for joining.
Just good. I didn't realize it was going to become a whole debate with like me on the pro side and then him on the con side.
No,
but
Maddie
I'm
Maddie
on the
likes
con side. I love Game Pass.
Yes, Maddie likes he likes Game Pass.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, then. This is going to be Xbox
We are
love.
friends. We are friends, not
Okay,
enemies.
great.
Yeah,
Alright,
yeah. No, I'll say Maddie runs the podcast with
Defining Duke, yeah.
Yep, Defining Duke. So he has an entire Xbox podcast that he runs. So
Oh, okay. All right. I misinterpreted the start of the call then. Great. I'm here for this. Let's
Yeah.
go.
yeah. So we're a couple years now into Microsoft's push for Game Pass, and they've certainly ramped things up now. We have them grabbing MLB The Show, which was a pretty big get for Microsoft considering Sony developed a game for Game Pass day one. And they technically bypassed Sony, went to MLB and got the publishing rights and all of that so they could put it on there. And I'm sure that was an awkward situation as it was, but it came out, and I think that was a good use because it was a sports game that, let's face it, will be $20 by the end of the year. So it's good to have that on there. And then Outriders showed up, but we did have a bit of a snag with the latest Game Pass game. That was what Maddie brought up. Which game was that?
That was Dark Alliance, and it was broken across all systems. But I really I want to make it clear here, just because I don't know how many people who watch your channel watch mine, that I am very pro Game Pass. My primary point of mild concern was that we see a lot of broken games in our industry, and it's an industry-wide problem. And I was more so arguing the point of, does it need to be a Game Pass problem? So it's obviously not on Xbox that these games come out broken, but with the money that they paid to get them on the service, I was discussing, hey, is this something that maybe they should take a little bit of a closer look at? Do these broken games, I'm looping Outriders into that a little bit as someone who loves that game, by the way, but Outriders with inventory wipe bugs and substantial problems with its balancing and just lots and lots of bugs across these two games, where I was looking at it thinking, I love the idea of day one. I want more of that. We're seeing more of that, but can this become a problem? Can it mount, or does it just stop here? And so it may look knee-jerk now, and I totally respect and understand that. It's a very disagreeable approach, but it's something that, as someone who's very pro Game Pass, I just worry that it can go down a particular rabbit hole.
Okay, I see. You mean for like some of the third-party deals that they're making,
Yes.
kind of where they're putting their basically the brand, because Game Pass is attached to that when it shows up, obviously, because they're like, hey, Outriders Game Pass day one, and then they're like, and those are the things. I get what you're saying. They can kind of muck up the waters with Game Pass, which has seen very good PR, especially
100%.
recently online. So I can kind of understand what you're saying there. My thought is, as we get into Microsoft's first party spinning up now, let's face it, it took them like 2 years to get things going here. We haven't had an exclusive on the system since it released for the Series X. I mean, Flight Simulator's coming, but I'm thinking more about like Halo, the thing that was on the back of my Series X's box when I bought it.
Yeah.
And obviously that was delayed out, and what they showed at E3 showing was good. Like I think everyone looked at that and said that was a good showing.
I'm excited for Halo for Christmas. I think that's really cool.
I've definitely
seen Xbox for a while as that sort of turning point that we had with the Wii U going in the Switch, where no one had any faith in anything Nintendo, whether it's a console, their games, their services. Well, the games, actually, they had pretty good faith in that, but they just didn't have general faith in Nintendo moving forward. And I think Xbox is in that area right now. Like, when I used to talk about Switch, and before it was out and it was going to be a success, I felt confident about it. People would say it had no games and that it wasn't going to be a big success. And the same thing happened a couple years ago. I made a video about Game Pass 2 years ago. And I said that I feel like this service is going to do well. It's going to blow up. It's going to help Xbox move into the next generation. And I'm looking at that video now, and it's got a lot of dislikes. It's the same thing,
man. In 2017, when it launched, it's the same exact thing. Yeah.
People have been really against this. And I have a weird mindset where I look to the future, and I'm like, games are going to end up being streaming one day, whether we like it or not. Decades down the line, possibly. Everything's going to be digital, because it's happened with all other media. It's happened with music. It happened with TV and movies. You got Netflix, you got Spotify. And right now, Game Pass is very comparable to Spotify with how many issues like music artists have with Spotify as far as trying to figure out pricing and then what to sell their music for on the streaming services. And it's the same thing with Game Pass. I mean, Phil Spencer talked about it like 7 months ago. They're trying to figure out what to pay for these games. Like, they'll have indie devs come to them and be like, if you pay us this much, we're willing to be on Game Pass day one. But then they have the bigger games they have to seek after. They have to throw tons of money at. Then they have games that are willing to do like by download and like you pay us this much per download. And they're more happy with that because maybe they have microtransactions. So getting their games out for free, they make money on the microtransactions and so does Microsoft. So it's really confusing as to each game as to how much they should pay. There's not a set amount, which I think is what's so controversial is how much are these games actually making.
Right, on Game Pass, like
on
being
Game
there.
Pass.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously a case by case basis for. I mean, I'll admit I don't think Square had a ton of confidence in Outriders when it was releasing. It seemed like the People Can Fly who made Outriders were like, we'll see what happens, you know, when it releases, and then we'll decide if we can make more content for it. And hey, it worked out. It seemed like it was pretty successful. A lot of people picked it up and played it, and they seemed really happy. So I assume more content's coming for it. But
and Game Pass probably helped that game actually do better than it would.
Yeah,
it's a similar thing like with Luca that recently released on Disney Plus. That was supposed to be a theatrical release, and I think Disney kind of lost confidence in it. And they just made it a Disney Plus original, and a ton of people watched it on Disney Plus service that maybe wouldn't have gone to the movies and seen it. It's a really weird area we're in with games right now because we're starting that avenue, that Netflix for games, that Spotify for games. And I think it's a really cool service that just needs to figure out its bugs and its pricing.
I think they're still navigating a lot, which is one of the reasons I did call it an experiment on Twitter. That not a lot of people like that word, but I still think they're kind of navigating, experimenting with what works and how to make Game Pass be a thing, because they still have Xbox Live Gold that still exists, and even though it's part of Game Pass, it does seem like they're still unsure if they can get rid of Xbox Live Gold and keep Game Pass, or how is this all going to work together. And I think there is a future where Xbox Live Gold just goes away and they just have Game Pass Ultimate. But I still think they're in this phase right now, at least to me, until they start getting their big games out and show that the service is completely sustainable, it's profitable, and they can put out these highly acclaimed, these big-time critically acclaimed masterpieces, as people say, for some of these Sony games. If those come out and they drop on the service day one, I mean, the value in Game Pass just skyrockets then.
Yeah. I mean, this is already insane value on Game Pass, even without Xbox doing their part. But I feel like it's coming. Like, we're on the cusp of that being, like, the new wave, especially for Xbox. I mean, they've been selling like crazy since that E3, right? Like, GameStop got a ton more stock in, and they all sold out immediately, more than they had on launch. So something is working. I mean, what are the numbers for people signed up to Game Pass? Last time I looked, it was in the millions.
I think it was 18 million last we heard.
That is insane.
18 million. So it's probably probably north.
A pop?
It's probably either close to or just north of 20 million, I would assume, right now, with how much it's been pushing in E3, and I think, I mean, think about if they do get to a point where they have 100 million signups for Game Pass. At $15 a piece per month. I mean, that is a pretty substantial amount of funding that comes in every month for either buying third-party rights to drop it on a Game Pass or funding a new, hopefully weird project. That's my biggest hope out of Game Pass, is that we get the Psychonauts kind of games that kind of roll in where they just take a shot and they're like, we already have our first-person shooter games, which they showed a lot at E3, but like they try something weird, with their studios.
That's why I'm so excited about their indie scene. I was looking at their July releases, and they got like Death's Door as an exclusive. They have the Ascent coming, and these are games that no one's really talking about, but they're these kind of small experiments. Like, one's a twin stick shooter, one's this sort of Sin City style art style, and it's very like bloody, but you're playing as a crow with a sword, and it's just wild and different. And I feel like indies are going to be very attracted to Xbox just because of Game Pass and the exposure it brings. So to me, that's like the more exciting thing, because I usually assimilate indies with, I think, Nintendo right now. I think like the Switch is a beautiful indie machine, and I think Xbox has a chance to really crack into that market where, I think PlayStation at one point was the strongest part of it all with their relations with indies, and the Vita was a great component of that. So it's just interesting to see all that shift around, where I think more to your point is you're going to see them continue to experiment. And that's the most attractive part of it all is, you don't like, a lot of people worry that we're going to see this generalization across gaming and it's all going to be shooters, open world games, like one type of game. And I think it's going to go the other way now because you're going to have this baked in multi-million player library of subscribers.
Yeah, I think indies is a huge thing for the Game Pass too. Like, don't even get me started with Switch indies. Like, I have some figures that I've forgotten. Something like SteamWorld Dig 2 sold twice as much on Switch than it did Steam. Like, Switch is insane for indies, but you got all that Switch tax. But if you got Game Pass, these indies can strike deals. The games that maybe, wouldn't have got a look in, suddenly they're being presented on the Xbox home screen, new arrivals to Game Pass, this new indie, and they're getting paid for those people that are playing it, where otherwise people had never even heard of that indie game. And
Bug Fable's heading to Game Pass soon, actually.
Yeah, exactly. I think that'll do really well on Game Pass.
Yep, I say if you're an indie developer, you take the bag from Microsoft, they offer it up.
For
Absolutely.
sure,
absolutely.
Get that money.
For
definitely.
Sure. Their deals are interesting because I've heard all manner of things from they'll just give you like a lump sum to they'll pay you per download, and I wonder how that differs per project, like what an indie would get versus.
I think it really all depends on like the people making the game and what they think the game is worth, what Microsoft thinks the game is worth, and then what kind of deal they strike and figure out. I mean, there's an article with Phil talking about that, but it's literally case by case basis. And he said that he's offered people money and they would prefer to do the download. So it just really depends on the devs.
It's interesting because we have Microsoft going this route, completely different way of monetizing games going forward. And then we have Sony going to $70 games. So we're basically going to have a look as to, I guess, which model could technically win out as we go along. Because let's say Game Pass does end up being the best way to do this. Maybe, I don't know. Do we see a world of subscription services in gaming? That is the
awkward.
So I did go through the thread before I removed the tweet because we will just start arguing about the most random things I've ever seen, and it just became redundant and unnecessary. But I did start taking a note of some of the things people didn't like necessarily about Game Pass, but the future that Game Pass could present. One of those was, are we going to get to the point where there are so many subscription services out there for every single company, and you're trying to keep track and figure out what to sign up for rather than just buy a game when it releases?
I mean, that's where we're at now with Netflix. And yeah, maybe it is bound to happen. Like, Netflix had a good 3, 4, 5 years where it was king and you just had to have Netflix and that was it. And now there's Hulu, HBO Max, NBC has their own. Everything's getting their own exclusives. And then shows are swapping around networks. Something you were playing or watching here is now over here. I think that's a long ways down the line because I don't know who else can afford to do a Game Pass structure like Microsoft can, but I definitely see that being a possibility.
Yeah, I think the way that the industry is lined up is I almost feel like we won't see that. The reason I say that is I look at like Uplay, and I just, obviously I'm biased here, right? But like I just think that's so unattractive when they're like Uplay Plus $15 a month, and then you look at Game Pass or EA Play, which was a decent price, like $5 a month, but they're like, let's just bring it into Game Pass.
Yeah, it's part of Game Pass.
Yeah, it's like, well, now I'm not going to sign up for EA Play. So I feel like Xbox, and really in turn Microsoft, has the deep enough pockets where they can just take it over. And my interest really lies in what PlayStation does, because they have to get crafty with it, where they take a more quality-oriented, like, let's get 40 really just top-tier titles. Not that Game Pass doesn't have that, but just like our exclusives and everything, and just bundle that together as our subscription service. Are they behind too much to start the streaming future that we're kind of heading toward? The future is understandably the real concern with Game Pass, because you just don't know where everything's going to end up.
That's true. Like we think it's going to work out and do well because of kind of their start right now, and we haven't even seen games necessarily from Microsoft to push the service heavily, like a Halo and like a Horizon 5 and Fable and Perfect Dark, and the list goes on there. But I mean, there's a possibility that Game Pass just doesn't work out and we continue along like we always have, where you have a box, you release a game, and then the game pushes the box and software sales and all of this. So that's, I think, the biggest thing now is we're going to have really Sony line up on their side with their typical traditional method, and then we'll have Game Pass next to it, and it'll be an interesting case study where Microsoft's kind of doing this as I said, experiment off on their own, but it seems like they're rolling along pretty well with Game Pass.
With 18 million downloads, I don't think that experiment is ending anytime soon.
They have a lot of muscle behind it right now. So I'll be really curious when they mention that it's become profitable, and at that point, once it becomes profitable and a successful part of the Xbox and gaming brand, then I mean it's I assume just here for the long run. I still think they're going to stay behind Game Pass for at least another decade. Like, I think win or lose, I think they're behind this thing for at least like a full console generation at the minimum.
It's the main thing they have going for them right now, and has been for the last couple of years. It's kept them going.
Yeah. I do wonder with third-party deals, like how often will they strike them as 2022, where we're starting to see like Redfall and Starfield, and really 2023, where you start to see all the other exclusives come out, what it will look like then. I know it's like maybe just a little too skeptical for some people, but I just wonder right now is exciting is like this fall and some of 2022 is loaded up with cool third-party deals. Do they pump the brakes on that a little bit because they're going to finally start getting games from internal studios?
Yeah, they might not have to. They might not have to look around and be like, let's see if Square has anything we can grab from them, or any of these other companies, because they're like, well, we have like 24, 25, like an obscene amount of studios, and they could still add more. That we have games coming out every 2 to 3 months anyway, and they're like sizable games. They're not like indie or smaller games that we can push out there. So they might just continue building from within and just have a nice cycle set up. The thing I'm curious about is if they will be prepared to have a studio or two work on a game for like how long PlayStation would have one of theirs, like 5-6 years. Would they be prepared to do that if a game needs to go that long in development? I would like to think they would, because when it eventually comes out, it would like do crazy numbers with Game Pass signups. But that's my other big thing right now is, will they let a game go that long in development?
They said they want to do more acquisitions. So my guess is they're just going to keep getting more studios under their umbrella, where those teams can take their time for 5 years or whatever, because they have so many that are in development where they're just going to keep rolling them out over time, where no one's going to really conflict. And if anything, get more time. Like, I always found it peculiar that Starfield has this, I'm looking forward to it, but it's got this release date at the end of next year, but like Halo didn't. And just, I'm wondering if the way they're dating things, if they just went like, well, Starfield could be ready early on, like mid 2022. Let's move it back a couple of months, make sure it's really good to go.
I'd like to. I would be curious, like you're saying about the release dates and all of this. They could get to a point where they just have so many signups that they just shadow drop a game in, like one of their bigger games at like an E3 or something, and it's just available now on Game Pass. I almost wonder if that's like something else they would try in the future. Halo is weird though, because that's a strange one. It's free to play for the multiplayer, but the campaign is going to be a Game Pass thing, really. And I kind of think they're waiting for Call of Duty, and then they'll be like, okay, now we'll date it. So I you know what? I think Game Pass is pretty good. I think it's a great value. And you know what I thought about the other day was, when I was younger, we had Sega Channel, and now I'm thinking all the kids now are growing up, and they have like their parents probably are just going to sign up for Game Pass and say, here you go, just leave me alone. You have Game Pass.
That's the thing. Like, we've talked a lot about like the developer side, the technical side, but as far as like a consumer signing up to Game Pass and playing some games, it's really fun. And even if like later on down the road we get competition and we're getting split between a couple different services, I mean, that's where we're at now with Netflix and all those. And like, yeah, it sucks, right? But isn't it still better than like 10, 15 years ago, when if we wanted to watch something, our options were to wait for it on TV or go buy the DVD, spend like $30 on the 4K, or what is it, like $70 on a full game? But we might not want to spend $70 on a full game. Like, I played Strange Brigade on Game Pass. Had a ton of fun, finished it. I would have been pretty upset if I spent $60 on it.
You bring that up about the streaming options now for video. I feel like we get a lot more odd, I guess, production out of that now, or more interesting stuff, because they're looking to compete so much. Like, I almost wonder if an adaptation of Invincible would have existed if there wasn't.
That show is so good. Can we just talk about that show for 10 minutes?
But would that exist if Amazon Prime Video wasn't looking to battle it out with HBO and some others?
Because that was Amazon's idea, to fund that show, make that show, get that show made, right? There's definitely a ton of shows that wouldn't have got made otherwise.
You know what? I almost wonder if we'll start seeing Microsoft even go out and start funding some more third-party projects, like that were kind of left off to the side that we heard were canceled or something like that. Or maybe they go to Capcom and get weird and they're like, give us a Mega Man game, we'll fund it and drop it on you. But like they could do some weird stuff like that if they have that kind of funding.
Yeah, if the service becomes profitable enough that dropping games on there gets people to sign up, gets people downloading and playing, then why not? That's exactly the same thing. I compare this, obviously, for me. I compare Game Pass so much to streaming services like Spotify and Netflix. I can't not, because it's the same thing. And I've sat through CDs becoming digital. I've sat through movies becoming digital. And now I feel like we're all sitting through games becoming digital. And I don't know why everyone is so scared of it, because I can still go and buy a CD. I can still go and buy a vinyl
That was my
record.
other thing I was going to bring up was the other thing I saw pushback is that they don't like renting games or any of that. But it's strange. That's the thing that's interesting to me is if you have Game Pass, usually they'll even give you a discount if you wanted to buy the game. So like the option's still there. Like
That's
maybe
never
when we
gonna go away. Not in our lifetime. That's
what
never
I was
gonna go
saying.
away.
Yeah, I think they'll always try to at least sell you the game if you, especially third parties who want to put their game on Game Pass, they're still gonna be like, hey, you want to buy this game?
We'll
like,
be able to buy CDs until the day we die. We'll
Yeah,
be
we can still
able
buy
to
those,
buy video games until we die. It's just, it's there. It's more convenient. It's easier. It's for certain people. And eventually, when we're all dead and gone, it's going to be the way the world works.
Yeah.
We're not longer holding down all physical collections.
I just, like I said, I was thinking about it as like the general audience, the mainstream audience, being able to see this as a viable thing to buy for their kids or their family, or be able to save money on some of this stuff, because games are just,
I bought my brother an Xbox
expensive.
for his birthday. I had a choice between an Xbox and PlayStation. He wanted a new console. My brother's like 18. He works a part-time job, you know, living at home. I bought him an Xbox, and I'm like, use your pocket money, use your money from your job, $10 a month. Doesn't get pocket money at 18. Your part-time job, your $10 a month. You can have all these games, and he's stoked, man. He doesn't have to go out and buy $70 games all the time because he can't afford it.
Yeah. Like I said, when I was a kid, if this was around, this would have been the most amazing, mind-blowing thing I've ever seen.
Yeah,
You never have to buy an Xbox exclusive again, and then you have all these
Yeah.
indies and everything else, all these third-party games. They've got Red Dead on there now. I think the online maybe, but there's so much to play.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was interesting the pushback Game Pass was getting for a while there, but you know they seem to have turned around the overall PR with it, and I feel like the majority of people are on board with Game Pass at this point. So
yeah, it's hard to argue with money saved.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought. Like I said, if you still like the game, you can buy it. So I'm curious where things will go for Game Pass over the next couple of years here. So that'll be fun to keep an eye on as we go along. So that was just a quick talk about Game Pass with a couple of guys here. We got Mr. Matty Plays there. We got Wood from Beat 'em Ups. Make sure you guys check out their channel down in the description, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Take it easy.